Hey everybody, it's Coach Bronson here, and today I have Dr. David Harper, who's you're in Colorado, right?
No, I'm in Vancouver,
You're
British
in
Columbia,
Vancouver.
Canada.
See,
yeah, we met in Salt Lake City, but I'd done a previous talk in Colorado at Low Carb Denver a couple of years ago.
That's why I was
think
thinking you were from Denver. Okay, because that's what I was looking at. Cool. So you're a Canuck. You're from Canada.
Proud Canuck, yeah, from Canada, yeah, born and bred West Coaster. So
okay, all
yeah.
right. I'm actually part Quebecian. Quebec, is that how that? Where's that come from? My grandfather's from Quebec, a Quebecer, yeah. So yeah. I've got some blood from there.
Well, I was brought up in Montreal, so I consider myself kind of bi-coastal. So
there you go, cool. So yeah. Dr. Harper, you've got a lot of experience in the science space, in the technology space, in educational space. Like you've done a lot of different things, and you're going to talk to us today about keto. We're going to talk a little bit about cancer. Maybe we get into the immune system. I mean, there's a broad range of things that you can kind of talk about. Before we get into that, though, I want to remind everybody watching to subscribe to the channel if they're not subscribed already. Please make sure to click the bell so that you're notified anytime there's a new video that I put out. But most importantly, any information that you hear that touches you or impacts your life, please share that information with somebody else. I guarantee you, we're going to talk with Dr. Harper today, and he's going to give you some information that's going to blow your mind and make you aware of things that you may not have known before that someone else could use. So please make sure that information gets out there. The more we can spread the word about what keto can do, about what fitness can do, about how to improve your quality of life, the better off we will all be. So Dr. Harper, thank you very much for being on. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Coach. And I think that's a great introduction, because I think that's why everybody in the keto community, as you know, we've become friends. It's a very close community. We're very supportive, and we're all in it for the same reason, which is to help people live happier, healthier lives, and to attain optimal health through nutrition and exercise. And so thanks. I think you framed the whole conversation really well.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, and that's really what I want to do. I'm very passionate about getting the word out to people, and then also giving information, because I'm finding there's so many people that are making changes and they're becoming that little candle. You know, don't hide your candle, right? You have to get that candle out there and share your story. So if we can help one person, then that person helps a person, and it just kind of changes from there. So, and I'm sure that's something you see on the scientific side of things, right? You know, as things go, the ball starts rolling. We were talking about that before we started recording. You were just mentioning that there's some stuff happening in the scientific medical space with keto, and it's kind of, people are starting to kind of catch on. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, well, it's the sort of the medical community is starting to catch on now. One thing people might not be aware of is the average length of time it takes to get from, bench science discovery that's published in academic journals to common practice in the clinic is typically about 15 to 17 years. So things move very slowly. I think Max Planck is often, I paraphrase, but he said science progresses one funeral at a time, because there's sort of a present paradigm that people adhere to, and it's very hard to convince people that they might be wrong. Whereas good science would say, when presented with new data, new information that's different from the existing model, we should reject that model and accept the new one based on this new data, assuming that it's rigorous, good science. And so what I can tell your listeners and your viewers is we've been working on this stuff hard for 20 years now, since the early 2000s. The best researchers at the best universities all over the world are doing real hardcore science at the cellular molecular level, working with athletes and patients as we do. I work, I'm a professor of kinesiology at the University of the Fraser Valley here in Vancouver, but I work with the BC Cancer Research Center and its immunology lab. So we do the immunohistochemistry, it's called, the cellular chemistry of the immune reaction for patients, specifically with metastatic breast cancer. And we look at the therapeutic benefits of ketogenic diet as an adjunct therapy to their standard of care. So right down at that real cellular molecular level, Also, the main cohort is all at the Jeff Volek's lab, Dr. Jeff Volek at the Ohio State University in Columbus. I've been taught to say it that way.
Yep.
So that's, yeah, so it's really Jeff's lab. I'm just sort of an adjunct researcher with the Cancer Research Center. So we've combined efforts to really use imaging, use morphological measurements, to use cellular molecular measurements to evaluate the therapeutic benefits of ketogenic diet. So I want your listeners to know this isn't a fad. This is real hardcore science, and that's why keto is sticking this time. Is that, and you're seeing more and more keto restaurants, keto products, and all that, and keto athletes like yourself, and it is a bit of advocacy, because what I like to tell people is, do you have time to wait 15 or 20 years for our discovery to get into practice, or do you want to adopt those today? You can go and read the research papers yourselves and realize what's out there. But by the time that gets through to your family practice physician, it's going to be a while, and they are led and directed largely for liability reasons to what we call standard of care. So it's what their advisory bodies tell them. So what the good news here is, for example, the American Diabetes Association just a couple of days ago has now released a whole document you can buy from them about the positive therapeutic benefits of ketogenic diets and low carb diets for people with type 2 diabetes. I mean, that's just an example. The American Cardiology Society, the American, Canadian, New Zealand Diabetes Society. I mean, all of the medical community is now coming to realize the therapeutic benefits of this. And the reason why it's been slow is it's contrary to what everybody's learned about diet, which is fats are not bad, they're good. We got it wrong about 40 years ago when we told people to stop eating fat, and people started eating lots of highly digestible carbohydrates and sugars, and that's what led to the diabetes epidemic and the associated comorbidities, we call them, of cancer, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's.
So with the ADA coming out with this paper, the work you've been doing, and I'm sure there's dozens or hundreds, I don't know how many people have been working on it, but I'm sure a lot of people. Where would you say we are in that? I don't know if there's stages or processes of, okay, the scientific community is really into this and seeing that there's things happening. The medical research side of things, not necessarily the medical clinical side of things, is starting to see, hey, and go like, wait, there's something to this. The ADA, I'm assuming maybe the AHA and the other organizations may not be far behind about some of the stuff. Like, that's diabetes, right? So what about heart, cardiovascular, Alzheimer's, all of the other things that are in organizations that are designed to help prevent and keep these things? And the American Cancer Association, like all of these organizations, are they part of this, or are they next in line?
Both. When they endorse it, then that's really good news for the rest of us in the keto community, in the keto research community. What we call a well-formulated ketogenic diet, which means it provides full nutrition. I think that. And what I do actually is when I'm traveling, it's taxi drivers and servers in restaurants. If you mention keto to them and they know what you're talking about, that means the word's getting out. I tell you, like 10 years ago, nobody would have known what you're talking about. 5 years ago, there was an enlightened group. Now you ask pretty much anybody. Now they might not know what it is, but they've certainly heard the word. So it's a meme, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
And part of the problem with it being a meme is it's gained popularity largely through social media. So we're using that tool now to get the good news out and the right and accurate news out. But there's also a lot of misinformation, and there's even some disinformation from the vested interests who don't like what we say. And honestly, it's the processed food industry, which is a $3 trillion a year industry that's selling poor quality food to the population that tastes good and people can't stop eating. And then we wonder why people are getting sick, right?
Yeah, so. It's funny as you're describing where we're at with keto in the marketplace and perception, the general public's perception. I'm reminded of what CrossFit went through several years ago. CrossFit, 10, 13 years ago was this thing. No one knew about it. And then slowly you start seeing it get mentioned. People, like you said, taxi drivers and waiters and servers, they start when the everyday person starts hearing it and at least having heard the word, not knowing what it means. And then they had the similar thing, right? They had the different fitness organizations that were blackballing them and coming out with studies that were saying how bad it was and it's going to hurt you and all this other kind of stuff, which they actually, I don't know if you know, they actually won a lawsuit against them, against these different organizations. But yeah, so it's very similar. And now it's kind of everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people know about CrossFit. They have at least an idea of what it is. They may not want to try it yet. That's a whole different discussion, but I can totally see the parallels between keto. In my opinion, the ketogenic diet and the CrossFit methodology being the two best of the fitness and the nutrition world. I'm totally on board with both of those things and where they're at. I like that.
Yeah, and I think with CrossFit's more of a brand, right? So that it's based on high intensity interval training or HIIT, and that's something that did revolutionize. Another Canadian discovery, by the way, fellow from the university. Well, I shouldn't say discovered, but he was the one that did the critical research on high intensity interval training. So if people, you train differently and you can train quicker and get better results. And so, these are what we call paradigm shifts. The model is changing and we change with it. And what the good news about social media is we do have an avenue to get the information directly to the consumer or the patient.
Right.
And what I appreciate about what you're doing is getting the right information, accurate information. I'm not trying to sell anything. I don't sell anything other than my book, which is really just a vehicle to get the right information out to people.
Exactly.
Otherwise, I'm just helping people. I do pro bono work, helping women with breast cancer, but I'm not in here to make money. I'm here because I went into health sciences and so on to help people get healthy. Yeah. And I think waiting for politicians, I wouldn't wait for that. You don't have time for that. No. And they have so many competing interests that it's not worth waiting for them. So, write your congressman, forget about that. Yeah. They'll go in the circular file right away. You just need to listen to the right people, get the right information. And so thanks for providing an avenue for me to do that today.
And the same for you. I mean, we're both authors now, right? So I just came out with my book.
Yeah, got your book out
for a little bit, right? So talk
right
about
here.
That's mine. So and the same as you, like I put my book out there really not because I'm thinking it's going to make me rich, right? But there's only so many people that are electronic. There's only so many people that are going to be on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook. And then there's a whole nother group of people that they'll just go buy a book, so having as many avenues as possible to get the information out there, I think is really key, because people connect to information differently. So that
I was going to say our books they're not expensive, right? So for a price of a couple of cups of coffee, you can have it there, and then it's a resource that you have forever, and you can refer back to it. I got to say, I just got your book a while ago. I've been through it. I've read about half of it now, but it's really nicely laid out, very approachable. Anybody can kind of pick it. You can almost flip to any part of the book and get some useful information right there. But it's organized nicely, and it's not like dense prose. It's organized sort of point form and very, very user friendly and approachable and an engaging style. And there's lots and lots of good information in there.
I try to put as much in there as people could absorb without getting completely overwhelmed.
Well, you don't have to do it all at once, right? You can just I would say take a chapter of your book a week and just put that into practice. And then over time, you'll, over 3 or 4 months, you'll have it all put together.
Well, let's talk about your book. So you have the BioDiet. Hold your book up real quick so people can see that.
That's this one here.
And that's book. So you said it's been out for about 2 years?
3 years now.
3 years now. Okay. Yeah. So, and what is that all about? That's not just keto and cancer. That's more just like, what is a good biologically sound diet?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's the subtitle is The Scientifically Proven Ketogenic Way to Lose Weight and Improve Your Health. So it's sort of in 2 parts. The first part explains why. And I think there's a lot of that in your book too, is it's not just this is what you should do. It's not a recipe book.
Yep.
But the first half of it's only about 100 pages, but it explains kind of the history of how we got in the mess we're in now, why this, high carb diet is making everybody obese and diabetic and sick.
Yep.
And it tells you, then why a ketogenic diet works. So I go through the whole digestive system. I actually have a little imaginary thing, shrink yourself down into molecule size,
Oh, like
follow
you're doing-
yourself through digestion. So you learn all the whole digestive process and what actually happens to carbohydrates when they get metabolized. Then the second half is a 5-step, 12-week step-by-step program that tells you what to eat, when to eat, how to do it, and talks about some of the other issues like sustainability.
Yep.
We were talking about that earlier. A lot of people adopt a ketogenic diet. Almost everybody that comes to ketogenic diets, almost everybody is to lose weight.
Yeah.
And I can tell your listeners and your viewers, it is the best diet for almost everyone. And I should say, first off, ketogenic diets are not for everyone. Everyone is different. About 7 out of 8 people respond very well to them. In that last 8, some people just don't respond well because of their genetic differences or epigenetic differences.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very small percentage of people for whom it's actually contraindicated, which means it's not right for them. They shouldn't be on it. These are people with genetic disorders that aren't able to metabolize ketones properly and so on. They're very rare.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing I say in my book is first thing you should do is talk to your physician, right? Don't do this alone. Don't get your advice from some YouTube video, even though we're doing a YouTube video. Get your advice from a professional. Well, that's why this is the same process we use in our clinical studies. So this is clinically proven, healthy. It's enjoyable and engaging. You can enjoy the diet. It's not like hospital food. When I say it's clinical diet, it's not hospital food. It's really good whole food. But there are, I have a list in there of all the contraindications that you should discuss with your physician. But for those 7 out of 8 people for which it works, you will lose weight. I mean, you'll lose fat, and it's not just fat. You lose about 3 to 1 lean mass to fat mass, which is why I think it's so important that your program helps people build back that lean mass, add to your lean mass.
Yeah. Well, I've actually gotten to the point now where I can have people lose fat and gain lean mass at the same time. So
that's what I did.
Absolutely.
That's what I did 10 years ago. I lost about 27 pounds of body fat, but I put on about 15 pounds of muscle mass. And I did that, when I was like in my 50s. And I think this whole idea of sarcopenia, you have this age-related decline. I think you can put on muscle mass at any age.
Yep.
But you got to have the right program, which your book talks about, and you got to have the right fuel, which my book talks about, and you can do that. Now I'm not talking about bodybuilding. I'm just talking about getting more lean mass to prevent, the age-related injuries that happen from people who have weakened muscles.
Yeah.
So the thing that, we're talking about sort of our target audience is I think a lot of people out there, they just think that, this is what happens when you're post 40, post 50, post 60. You put on weight, your blood sugar goes up, your blood pressure goes up. This is just natural. And so you get pills and surgeries and stuff to fix it. It doesn't have to happen that way.
It's how it goes, right?
And
I just turned 50 last week.
Yeah, I saw that. Congratulations and happy birthday.
Thank you. I joined AARP. Okay. I got an email like 2 days before my birthday. It was like, hey, you can join AARP now. So I joined
American Association of Retired People, right?
Yeah, right. Even though I'm not retired yet, but hey. And I got onto the website, and the first 3 articles on the website are, workouts for old people, go slow, don't use heavy weight, do this, do that, and how to combat falls and then they had like a nutrition quiz of what's the heart healthiest food, and don't even talk about that. I did not even, that was horrendous. Just all of these things, and it's like just the perception, the expectation is so off. And I feel like I take that as a personal challenge I want to change that, because it's absolutely ridiculous.
And wherever you are, you can get better. You can improve wherever you are. It may be a little more important as you get older because you're more susceptible to things like hip fractures and balance changes as you get older. But I kind of think of it like those salmon that swim up. As soon as they stop swimming and lay their eggs, they die. And humans are like that too. As soon as you stop moving, you start the process of dying. Absolutely. So you must and when you keep moving, you're sending all kinds of signals to your cells to say, we're still in the business of being alive here. We're not in the business of dying now. And that in and of itself affects you consciously and subconsciously. And it literally does send hormonal signals to your body to say, we're still in the business of moving forward and improving our health here. And that helps you live a longer, healthier, happier life.
So that brings up a question. It's just, as you were talking about moving and growing, the idea, let's going into the cancer, right? Because you'd spent a lot of time in cancer research and you're doing a lot of stuff there. Talk to me, tell everyone listening a little bit about what the balance between, if there's a balance, right? Because I hear it all. I don't hear it as much, but I have heard it off and on recently. I heard it a lot 4 years ago of avoid protein because of mTor. If mTor is, the higher your mTor, the more cancer risk that you have. So if you eat protein, it's going to raise your mTor, you're going to get cancer. And to my understanding is that for the most part, mTor is actually a beneficial thing, right? It's designed, we have it there to design to help us grow and get better and all of the things that we need to do. Should people scale back on protein to avoid getting cancer?
No. They certainly don't have to worry about, red meat causing colon cancer. That's, that's not realistic. There's epidemiological studies, but those are just correlations. They're not cause and effect. No, I mean, you mentioned mTOR. I mean, that's very specifically at the cellular molecular level. So mTOR is an acronym, stands for the mammalian target of rapamycin. It's the term. And essentially what it is kind of a black hole of about 200. I mean, get your listeners to go and put that into Google and you'll see all the functions of it. There's about 200 functions. They're growth and proliferation related functions. So I can see how people do that. They say, well, that's a growth thing. So, if you eat too much protein, you get more mTOR, that's going to promote the growth of cancer cells. Well, no, it doesn't actually work that way. mTOR is active all the time. What you don't want to do is have overactive mTOR. And so like everything else in your system, it has to be balanced. So if we back off, we just talk about what cancer is for starters. So first of all, it's natural, and that people have freaked out about that. We get cancer cells all the time, and it's a natural part. It's an unnatural process in a natural part of your body, and that things go wrong at the genetic molecular level that cause dysregulation of the reproduction of cells, so that instead of being normal healthy cells, they're just directed towards growth and reproduction, and that eventually leads to
keep going and just don't stop. Right.
So it is growth related. So I see how people can tie mTOR into that. And so I like to, people are probably shocked to know you get cancer cells all the time. We probably have cancer cells going in our bodies all the time, but we have an immune system that's designed. There's 2 or 3 different mechanisms, both innate and adaptive immune system, that are designed to find those cancer cells and kill them before they grow.
Okay.
So that's why getting it early is so important. That's why having a healthy immune system is so important.
Okay.
So the analogy I like to use is kind of like your back garden, right? You've got all your grass and flowers you want. Those are your healthy cells. But if you don't tend to your garden, you're the immune system here, that weeds will grow. So think of weeds like cancer. They're plants, they're natural things too, but they're not the ones you want there. And if you let the weeds grow, they'll outcompete all the other plants, and you'll end up with a very unhealthy backyard.
Right.
So our bodies are kind of the same way. We have these healthy cells, our normal body cells, and then these cancer weeds that are growing, we have our immune system, which is designed to find and weed them. And so it's kind of an arms race. And as we get older, you see people get more cancers. Why? Because their immune system isn't working quite as well as it used to be. It's not optimized. And that's just part of the aging process. Everything kind of slows down a little bit. It's, why we're giving vaccines to older people first, because their immune systems aren't quite as ramped up as younger people. And you don't want to have an overactive immune system either. Like, you got to be careful about immune boosting, because arthritis is immune boosted, MS is immune boosted. So you want to have it balanced, right? And so you want to tip the balance in favor of your immune system over the growth of the cancer cells. And the best way to do this is to maintain your health. Now, one of the most important growth factors in our body, forget about, mTOR and all that, is just insulin. Insulin is it's probably the most powerful growth factor in your body. In fact, you probably know there are people in the gyms that abuse it because it helps muscle growth, but it also will promote, cancer cell growth. And what elevates your insulin levels is carbohydrates. Everybody knows that. We have this in the Western diet, chronically high carbohydrate diet, you have chronically high levels of insulin. That gives you chronic stimulation of any cancer cells that are growing to grow more, right?
Okay. So it's like instead of having grass food, you're putting weed food in your garden.
Yeah. So by lowering the glucose burden, that's the sugar, all the carbohydrates you eat, other than some of the fibers, they all gets turned into glucose. That's the blood sugar. So if you lower the burden there, not to zero, but you just lower it, then you moderate the insulin levels back to their normal healthy level. Then your immune system now can take over and find those cancer cells before they grow. Now, what our study is actually looking at women that have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. So they're very sick. The medical system has essentially done all they can for them. And it's a very small study. So I would caution, your viewers to not read too much into this. Ketogenic diet is not a cure for cancer. Mm-hmm. It is, we think we've demonstrated, a good adjunct therapy. And one of the most important things we've demonstrated is even for women that are very, very sick with stage 4 breast cancer, it's safe. And they have the same response, because most women that have breast cancer, they also have obesity. They also they're very inflamed, and they're just ill. And then they're taking, chemotherapies and so on that are also wreaking havoc on their bodies. So it does work as an adjunct therapy, and they lose body fat the same way, and even an elite athlete would at the same rate. Mm-hmm. They upregulate. They reduce their insulin resistance. They're more insulin sensitive, which is good. Their inflammation comes down. We see exactly the same kind of results from this very sick population as we do from a normal population, and no adverse health effects.
So you said something about their inflammation. That's that I was been thinking about. I really, really like the backyard garden analogy for this. So if you have your backyard as your body, everything's growing, everything's good, cancers, the weeds. If you are your immune system, right? If, it's my backyard, so I'm acting as the immune system. I've got to run around and take care of everything. If my insulin load is high, if my glucose load is high, I'm basically feeding I'm feeding that cancer. The weeds are growing potentially faster than I can keep up with.
Right. So the glucose is the food. That's like sunlight to a plant, right? Because they have photosynthesis. The insulin is like fertilizer.
Okay.
So that's the fertilizer. It's making it worse, right?
Right. So it's making the weeds grow faster than I can keep up with.
Right.
If you add in, and I'm just seeing that you tell me this correlates, if this makes sense. If you add in, it's me in my backyard, right? I've also got to clean up my dog's poop, and I've got my kid running around, and then the guy in the front that knocked on the door to drop off a package, something spilled in the kitchen, and I'm running around doing all that stuff and trying to take care of my backyard, right? And you can equate that to all the other things that your body's trying to do if you're overinflamed, right? Your body's trying to do a bunch of other stuff, as well as fight off the weeds, keep the yard in shape and everything else. And so it's not just, the weeds aren't just getting extra support, but now your immune system's not capable of keeping track of things because it's got all this other stuff that you're doing.
I love that analogy, because essentially what you're saying, inflammation is the innate immune system, as opposed to the adaptive one that produces antibodies and specialized cells. So it's kind of a distraction, right? So you want to do the weeding, but now you're distracted by all this other stuff. So view the inflammation as a distraction. And what we found in a pilot study was people who are keto adapted, even 6 months or a year after, have much lower levels of systemic inflammation than the general public. And that was quite an interesting finding in and of itself. So I built this model that I presented it when we were together in Salt Lake City, all over the world, to physicians and scientists and so on. Very simple model for the root cause of chronic disease. And I know we like talking about root cause. So obesity, which is a disease, it's recognized in the United States for insurers and so on. So obesity, insulin resistance, which is what happens when you have too much insulin in your system for a long period of time. Your cells stop responding to that signal, so it makes itself worse. And then the third axis of that is the inflammation. And those three things, obesity, insulin resistance, inflammation, all make each other worse. It's like a vicious circle. And when you add carbohydrate to that, you're increasing the obesity. we can demonstrate that through the carbohydrate insulin model, which is now the more accepted model of what causes obesity. And then that old calories in, calories out we've forgotten about. You obviously it's going to increase insulin resistance because that high sugar diet is going to make you insulin resistant because you're going to be secreting more insulin. But that high sugar level in your blood is really inflammatory, right? And so all those things are getting worse on the high carb diet. The good news is if you just take that carbohydrate out and start with the sugar and start with the high glycemic index stuff, right, those things all get better, and they make so you lose that body fat. You become more insulin sensitive rather than insulin resistant. Your inflammation goes down, which we can measure with a test called ELISA for something called high sensitivity C-reactive protein. So we know your overall state of inflammation, and we see that time and time and time again. It's very consistent. Almost everybody will respond positively in that way. So if those three factors, and by the way, go ahead and look online anywhere, you'll see about 70% of chronic disease, that's mostly cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, 70% of that is due to those three factors. Wow. So if we have one drug-free, healthy way to improve those three factors, why, oh, why, Coach Dan, isn't the medical community going there first before they start cutting things off, prescribing drugs, giving people, more complicated explanations than they need, that basically take carbohydrate out of your diet for 7 out of 8 people. It's going to make you a lot healthier. And in fact, for diabetes alone, type 2 diabetes, 90% of people that are put onto a well-formulated ketogenic diet will reduce their need for insulin and metformin, the two main drugs. 60+% of them, 5 years out, won't need any drugs at all. In other words, they're virtually cured. So so it's now, we call it a reversal of diabetes type 2. Yeah. 2/3 of people, think of the savings to that in terms of the effects on the economy. Oh my gosh. Diabetes right now is about $500 billion a year. Just
that's not even, that's just type 2 diabetes, right? I've had personally, I've worked with a few type 1 diabetics who have gone from over 100 units a day to under 40 a day, right? Oh, yeah. And just in their pocket, it's like, oh my God, I'm making my insulin last 3 times as long as it used to, so yeah. So we have really good long-term clinical data to demonstrate the efficacy. And now those organizations, the diabetes societies, are recognizing that. They didn't want to because their old model was, well, diabetes related to obesity. Obesity is from eating too much fat, stop eating fat, and so that model never worked. It didn't work. It's been around for 40 years. It makes it worse. Yeah. I mean, what's the worst thing for somebody with glucose metabolism issues is to give them more glucose. I don't get that. It doesn't make sense to me either. Yeah, but that's the danger of these models that are really hypotheses that aren't tested. Yeah. They get into the public and then into public policy. Once it's into public policy, then you have to get politicians to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And they just won't do that. That's not part of their business. No. So what we have to do is just bypass that whole system and go right. And so what's happening now is, like, our clients or our patients, they're now going to their physicians and saying, hey, what about a ketogenic diet? And the physicians are going, I don't know, I got 4 hours of nutrition study in my whole medical school thing. Right. So you have to educate yourself. You have to empower yourself. And I think books like your book and in my book, that's what we're trying to do, is empower individuals to find healthier lives through nutrition, exercise. And by the way, the other things, those other distractions, when I was thinking about those are things like lack of sleep, right? Stress. Yes. That's the poop in the backyard. That's the kids or the stress, whatever it is. So you are going to be distracted by those things. So you have to do what you can. And health is simple. It starts with your head. You got to have the right information there. You got to have a positive attitude and so on. And then it goes to your nutrition and movement and exercise, and then, sleep and hygiene. It's really quite simple, but how many people actually do that? Well, take the time to think about how it's affecting. Yeah. The paradigm.
Every day more and more people are. The keto community is growing leaps and bounds, and people are starting. The sad thing is, though, Coach Dan, is that they're not doing it until they get sick, right? It's when they get sick, then they come to it. If we could, people ask me often, you work in cancer research, and I'm not like an expert in cancer research. I have my expertise in ketogenic diets that I'm applying to the clinical studies. I help manage the patient population, so on. But they asked me, what's the best treatment for cancer? And I said, best treatment is don't get it in the first place. Right. And so you need to do preventative medicine. You can't
Absolutely.
be going to Cheesecake Factory and drinking Coke all day and then having a salad for dinner, call that a balanced diet, and then hope you get through life without chronic disease. That just won't work.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good segue. I think you kind of knew where I was going. A lot of this discussion so far has been about carbs and that insulin and the issues that we have with that. The other side effect of the misinformation, I'll call it, of fat being the cause of obesity, is that we replaced healthy fats with healthier fats, right? So all these heart healthy oils, seed oils, vegetable oils, and all these other things that were produced as a replacement for the butter and lard that had been at the top of the list for years of consumption in the modernized world. Now it's flipped, and now the number one oils consumed are, canola oil, corn oil, grapeseed oil, and all these other things. And, there's a lot of information where you can see side by side the lines of consumption of seed oil and the growth of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah. And there's no question of that. And the main reason is those seed oils, the ones you mentioned, cottonseed oil, linseed oil too. Go and Google seed oil production facility or something. They look like oil refineries, right? Yep. And the process is, when you look at it, you go, wow, there's nothing more processed than a seed oil. If you're talking about processed foods, they're highly inflammatory. They're very high in omega-6 fatty acids. That inflammation again feeds into that, I call it the axis of illness, the obesity, insulin resistance, inflammation, highly inflammatory. Cardiovascular disease is not caused by fat in your diet. It's caused by inflammation, which can be sparked by smoking, by abuse of drugs, by lack of exercise, by stress, but in particular by a diet high in seed oils. And our friend Ben Azadi has a great part of his presentation shows, it's a study that came out that said, if you were going to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day for 20 years, what's your likelihood of getting, lung cancer? It's about like 20% if you smoke. I think it's more than 20 years. What if you ate seed oils every day that, which people are doing in their fast food and so on? What would be the likelihood of getting cardiovascular disease? It's like 100%. It's probably not quite 100%, but it's pretty close.
Absolutely.
So it's those relative risks. I used to have a slide in my talk that had, a 6-pack of sugary pop and a pack of cigarettes. So that's basically the same thing. Yeah. If you think of it that way, if you're reaching for one of those pops, you're getting like 4 or 5 cigarettes worth of bad health there. So think about that.
And and it goes to what you said, right? The best way to treat cancer is to not get it, right? So a good offense is the best offense is a good defense. If you, so that, building muscle, exercising, muscle reduces inflammation. And I don't think people realize that the more muscle you have, the less inflamed you're likely to be.
That's right.
And
the opposite is also true, because so if you look at your belly, you got a lot of fat there. Yeah. So half of the cells there by number are inflammatory macrophages. And they're sending all kinds of nasty signals like, you're getting decreases in hormones like leptin and adiponectin and so on. It disrupts your hormone cycles, but it's high, that whatever you want to call it, pot belly. Yeah. That thing is a big bag of inflammation. Yep. And that inflammation will make you sick. So I look at people and I see that, otherwise fairly lean people, that's the worst place for it, by that mid-abdominal visceral fat, and probably the fat in your liver too. We have something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NFALD, NAFLD. And that's something that actually responds really well to ketogenic diets too. In fact, there's just a paper out this week from the Verta group that showed how effective ketogenic diets were for addressing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as well. Okay.
I'll have to look.
But you're right, and the more lean mass you have, the less inflammation. The more fat mass you have, the more inflammation. It's a pretty simple equation, that one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what's You talked a little bit earlier about how there's a small portion of people that may or may not respond to keto.
Yep.
And I want to, and you did a great job of explaining, hey, don't just assume that you're not responding to it. You may need to go get a test or do something to kind of verify, hey, this is a disorder, a genetic thing, an epigenetic thing, a disorder, something's different about me. Can you talk a little bit about, because this is a question I get almost daily, right? This isn't working for me. I must be different, right? And getting people to understand that there's a lot of ways to do keto wrong. There's a lot of things, whether you're doing let's say you're doing keto 100% the right way, like you got the right thing on a piece of paper, that doesn't mean you're actually doing it, right? There's a whole list of self-evaluations and things to look at when you're trying something. Don't just assume that you're different, right? So can you just talk a little bit about what the phrase in your definition, bio-individuality, means?
Sure. So I'm actually a member of an organization called the Institute for Personalized Therapeutic Nutrition. So this is using nutrition as a therapeutic, and anybody in the nutrition world will realize that at the end of the day, as they say, the nutrition has to be personalized for you. So, for instance, I believe you adhere to a carnivore diet, which works for you. Some people want to do a vegan diet. Is that, and they go, I can't be keto, I want to do vegan. No, you can be keto and vegan at the same time, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to you have to have a lot of knowledge if you're going to do it that way. So everybody's body responds differently for a number of reasons. First of all, genetic reasons. So people have different genes. Now, 98+% of our genes are the same between all humans. We're all brothers and sisters here. We're all human animals. We all have the same physiology. We all have the same neurology and endocrine systems, but they work slightly differently depending on which genes are activated and to what degree. So you could have cancer-causing genes in your DNA that are never activated because of your healthy lifestyle, or the reverse could also be true. Then there's epigenetic factors. So this is really the interaction of those genes and the activation of those genes as proteins with the environment. And that environment is your internal environment and your external environment. Like, yes, it is the environmental system and, toxins in the environment and air and so on, but it's also the environment inside your body, the microenvironment around each of those cells. So those two things play a role in that individuality. And then we all have different lifestyle choices too. So that's, part of the importance of your head. You got to get your head in the game. Yeah. And you have to have some discipline, right? And if, the idea that I'm just going to live my life the way I want, I don't care what anybody tells me, and when I get sick, I'll fix it. That's a bad and expensive way to shorten your life. And you're probably, there's like the lifespan, there's the health span. So what we're doing now is we're extending people's lifespan, but their health span is like this. Yeah. Like when they hit middle age, they're less and less and less and less healthy. Yeah. So what we want you to do is it doesn't necessarily mean a longer life, but a really healthy life, and have a bad couple of weeks and then it's all over and you go meet your maker. And I think that's what everybody should be striving for. Right. And the thing is, the lifestyle changes that we would recommend you do actually really improve your overall state of mind, you'll be nicer to your family, you'll be happier, but you'll also be healthier, fitter, able to do more things. So
when you talk about the epigenetics, because that's a keyword I know a lot of my listeners have heard but may not understand really. It's possible to change your epigenetics, right? If you're eating things that are bad for your body and they're forcing gene expressions that are unhealthy, and then you change that and you change the environment of the inside of your body, your physiology and biology, you're changing your epigenetics and you're producing a environment that then will support proper function.
Right? Yeah. So you can't, it's like the deck of cards, right? You can't change the cards you're dealt.
Right.
And some people are dealt a good hand.
Flip some over and it's kind of like switches, right?
Oh yeah, it is kind of like switches. So the epigenetics, it's not a thing as such. The epigenetics are the what we call a post-transcriptional effect. So after the gene's been activated, what other effects downstream before those proteins become active and do what they do come to play. And it's powerful. That can be affected. And what's really interesting is that, for instance, for women, their lifestyle, even before they become pregnant, can have an epigenetic effect on their child that they're not even pregnant with yet.
Yeah.
So that epigenetic effect can actually go from generation to generation. And we see this with obesity issues and with sugar toxicity issues and so on that are actually passed on to the offspring. And if you look at, again, the United States has a problem with obesity, about probably 40% of American adults over 18 are obese. 72%, I think, now are obese or overweight.
Yep.
And in some populations, like African Americans, it's even higher. Like I think in African American women, it's like there's a huge rate. I think it's 84% are obese or overweight of adult African American women. So lower socioeconomic group, generally poor food quality, more processed food, more food that tastes good, you can't stop eating. So there's some social aspects to that too. Sure. So all of those environmental factors, but ultimately it's the decision you make, and you can only, it's like playing bridge. If you know how to play bridge, you have your hand, it's how you play it, right? It's not the cards you're dealt, it's how you play them, and how you play them is related to nutrition, exercise, sleep. Pretty simple. Awesome. If we could only get everybody to do it and stick with it, and you know what, I think you can. And one of the things that we could talk about is like sustainability, because you and I have both had clients or patients. They get on a ketogenic diet, they have these great effects, it's wonderful, but then they fall off the wagon, right? Yeah. And so, I developed an acronym for the model we use in the clinic, MOSES, right, which is motivation, opportunity, support, education, and sustainability. So we can get everybody switched over, and how do you sustain that ketogenic diet? And I think it comes through positive feedback. So the two things I would say, which are one of the great things about your book and my book, is education, that E in Moses. Yeah. People need to know why this is working, right? They need to understand as much as they can the biology of exercise physiology, the biology of nutrition, so that they are aware when they make those decisions about what they eat or whether they're going to move or not, what the downstream effects of that are going to be. Mm-hmm. They also need some, positive feedback psychologically. And when they start losing that weight and they feel better and they're getting stronger, that's the huge thing. But, I don't have any magic solution for how we stop people from falling off the wagon. But there are some things that you shouldn't do. And one is halfway, right? So I always say, preparation and commitment. You got to be prepared to do this. You got to be committed to do it. And I just say, give me 12 weeks. I'll take 10 years off your biological life. Yeah. With a well-formulated ketogenic diet. But then, you have to stay committed to it. And as soon as you, in weight management science, we have a phrase, if you gain a lot of weight and then you lose it, whatever you did to lose it, that's great, but you're going to have to do that for the rest of your life. So if it's bariatric surgery, you're not going to be able to do that for the rest of your life. So you need to find a lifestyle that's new and healthier that you can stick to. But I think also that education of your children, right, is make sure your children grow up eating fresh food, not eating junk food, and understanding the value and the wonderful flavor in good food. And that's why it's so important that they learn to eat healthy fats. Animal fats, like you mentioned, lard, pig fat, one of the healthiest things you can eat. People are surprised by that. There's an egg on the cover of my book for a good reason. It's probably nature's perfect food, animal food. Grass-fed cows producing butter, that is rocket fuel. And you're not going to get cardiovascular disease from eating that.
Not at all.
Unless you eat that and then you pour soft drinks and pizza and ice cream and that on top.
Yeah, there's a whole nother, right. Yeah, we can get into
So that's why I say you got to be committed. You got to say, okay, I'm going to, so I'm an experiment of one going on in life. And I people ask, do you ever cheat? Yeah. My birthday is coming up. I have a Guinness on my birthday once a year, because I drink wine, but I don't drink beer much. But actually Guinness, it turns out, if you want to know whether you're in a state of ketosis, you really have to test your blood, and we can do that in the lab. And it turns out Guinness is not so bad for some reason. We don't know. And so, I'll do that, but I don't have cheat days.
Right.
Now, when you're exercising, you need down days for recovery. That's a different thing, but you still need to stick with the program.
Sure.
But you can't apply that to nutrition because
right. Yeah, there's no down days on nutrition, right? I mean,
we talked about that gene activation. You'll remember the conversation we had in the van going out to Redmond. Was that, you know, if you've adapted, you've done all the work to be fat adapted, and then you go and you have that cheat day and you eat a bunch of cake or whatever it is, you break down, you have a bunch of beer, pizza, whatever, that's going to activate genes that can stay active for months. So all that hard work has gone to waste. It's almost like, you know, you've built up all that nice healthy muscle. Now we're just going to take them off and we're going to put them away and you're going to start over again.
Yeah.
So don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't
do that. Don't do that. A little bit here and there, you know, if you have a little slice of apple or whatever, that's one thing, but don't assume you can do these 5 or 2 diets on and off ketogenic diets. It's just not a healthy way to go about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Harper. I appreciate your time. This has been fantastic. A ton of great information. Where can people find you, find your information? Do you have a YouTube or a blog or something like that?
I have a website, and it's BioDiet, which I'll just hold the book up if that's okay. So it's BioDiet, all one word, .org, not .com, because I'm not in it for the money. You don't make money writing books, as you know. BioDiet.org. So on that site, you can order the book through whatever your favorite online bookstore is. But it's also available in ebook form. I believe yours is as well. Mm-hmm. You can order it there. It's a little bit cheaper. We also, my wife and I, my wife Dale Drury is the co-author. She helped me get the tone right, the engagement level high, so she's helped actually. There's a resources part on that. I was going to mention we did an audiobook together. That's what I was going to mention there. Okay. But she also has put a whole lot of the resources we use, like all the references you have in there, and all the media stuff that I've done over the last few years in the resources section at biodiet.org. Okay. And there's a bunch of stuff like the shopping list and some of the key figures, all there for free. You don't have to give me your email address or anything. You just go access it. And you can also email me from that site, which is just david@biodiet.org. So yeah, if they want to go and see biodiet.org, they can order the book. And if they have any questions, I will answer them. I might not get back to you in a day. Yeah. I get a lot of emails. I get a few hundred emails a day, as you might imagine. But I will answer your emails if you send an email to me. But one thing I will say, despite the doctor, that's my PhD, I'm not a physician and I can't prescribe medical advice. Right. So please don't email me saying, you know, I have this or my friend has this, what should I do? I can't give medical advice. I can give health advice. I can certainly help people that are interested in ketogenic diets, but I can't give medical advice. Sure. So please don't, sure. You know, you need to talk to your physician about that. That's
something that just popped in my head while you were talking. Are there any studies coming out, anything that you're working on, any papers or white papers or information coming out of anything that you know of that could be kind of like, hey, you guys need to know this is coming. This is awesome.
Well, there was a paper recently published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in the fall, and the lead author is David Ludwig, Ludwig. The title is The Carbohydrate Insulin Model, a Physiological Perspective on the Obesity Pandemic. And this is written by a group of people who are ketogenic diet researchers and those who are critical of ketogenic diets. And they've come together to write this perspective. And basically they've said in it, they talk about all the arguments and they basically make the arguments against which we've all agreed on right now, is that calories in, calories out model just doesn't work. That we have to abandon that. We have to abandon that as soon as possible. So what model should replace it? Gotcha. And I believe the carbohydrate insulin model, also called the hormonal model, that's one that's good. We will be having some papers coming out. I'm a lead author on one from the Ohio State University. We haven't picked the journal yet on our research on therapeutic benefits of ketogenic diets, well-formulated ketogenic diets for women with metastatic breast cancer. We have probably 3 papers. You know, there's an imaging one, there's one on the immunohistochemistry, and there's one on the clinical application. Those should be out sometime this year. Okay. Some of them are graduate students who are writing those up for their theses. Nice. Okay. But if they actually just Google my name, it's usually David G. Harper, Dr. David G. Harper. You'll find my talk that right the day after, the day before, I think yours, or maybe the morning before yours at Keto Salt Lake.
Salt Lake.
That's the most recent one. So Keto Salt Lake 2022. There's another one I did at Low Carb Denver in 2020, just before COVID hit. In fact, COVID hit when I was there. I almost didn't get back to Canada. That was at Low Carb Denver. And so they can have a look at those YouTube videos. Those are both cancer focused. And then I did one also for Keto Salt Lake on the fact that there's a lot of evidence to suggest, and here's one right here by Janelle Ayers, that, you know, a metabolic handbook for COVID-19 pandemic. And in there, it doesn't mention it, but it explains why a ketogenic diet would be beneficial in, you know, limiting or mitigating the risk for COVID.
Right.
Which everybody should hear about.
Immune system, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Exactly. And it shows you, the talk I do that was at Keto Salt Lake last year, I talk about the 3 stages of the immune system, and at every level, here's how a ketogenic diet should work. Do we have the clinical evidence for that? No. Can we say it works? No, because we're doing science, right?
Right.
And the same thing goes to the cancer research. It's just emerging. So we're pretty darn sure there's some benefit to it. We can't say exactly what that is, but what we can say is it's safe. We see improvements in some of those patients in the small population, and it's not going to hurt you. And it's something you need to talk to your physician about.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Harper. Appreciate your time.
I enjoyed it, and I'm enjoying our relationship here. And I encourage everybody to read your book too. There's not a lot of books that are specific, you know, for people on ketogenic diets, but again, it's very approachable. It's very point form. There's tons of great information in there. I'm not trying to sell it for you, but I think everybody should read it because I just think, you know, if I was going to write something like that, it would be the same information. You know, we can argue a few points here and there. Maybe we'll do that on another show, but yeah, keep up the good work. And please, folks, if you think this information is useful, pay attention to what Coach Dant was saying. Tell your friends, point them to this talk and the other talks, and get the proper news out to people that this lifestyle is the best way to prevent chronic disease, and that's the best thing for a healthy, happy life.
Awesome. Thank you.